Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to welcome a panel of three experts on their lives and on helping the rest of us understand the concept of Juneteenth and why marriage and family therapists should care about it. You are watching this on YouTube, so this is the Florida Family Therapy Alliance. Our website is all spelled out, floridafamilytherapyalliance.com. We tried to get one shorter, but I think somebody else had it. But anyway, so that's how you'll find us. And I am thrilled to have you here this evening. I hope that you will continue to look for emails from us on our future offerings. Throughout 2024, we will begin doing all of the licensure requirement stuff. That's not very, there we go. Anyway, the workshops for licensure renewal. And so at this time, I will turn this over to Malini, who is our moderator for this evening. Thank you, Malini.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Joy. So everyone, my name is Malini. I'm so happy to have you guys with us. And thank you for the three awesome ladies that's joining us on our panel tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and have them actually take over and just introduce themselves. Let's start with Miss Case. Hopefully you said that right.
It's Kais. So
Kais, apologies.
So I am Michelle Kais. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of Florida. I have a virtual only therapy practice. And I'm also the owner of a company called Mommy Consults. We do digital products for moms, also wellness events for moms, really focused on really putting their needs first as moms. And so a lot of my clientele are, of course, in maternal mental health, but also a lot of my clients are dealing with intergenerational trauma. So I work with a lot of somatic work, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR. I found those to be the most effective modalities for my clients. And so that's my ultimate goal, to really create a generation of wellness for our moms and for our children.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Are you able to share why is Juneteenth important to you and the work that you do?
Yes, generational trauma is the biggest reason why Juneteenth is important to me. And I'll talk further about that. We have to look at generationally how trauma has affected the African American community. And we have to think about that. So when I talk about it, it's mind, body, spirit, trauma keeps the score. And so we have to really be educated about Juneteenth and also about how it can affect our families in the African American community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is Kais. There we go. Dr. Jamila Holcomb, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dr. Jamila Holcomb. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, also in the state of Florida, and private practice owner of Holcomb Counseling and Consulting. In my private practice, I specialize in individual, family, particularly parent-child relationships, and trauma counseling. I also provide consultations and trainings to practitioners and educators, really centered around eradicating anti-Black racism, the effects of racial trauma, and ways that we can enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within higher education and within mental health. I'm also teaching faculty at Florida State University in their Human Development and Family Science Department. And I really enjoy this blend of my careers, my work as a professor and a therapist, because I feel like I can do multiple things at once, right? Like my private practice and my role as an MFT, I can meet humans on a personal, vulnerable level and kind of walk with them on their unique journeys. But then as a professor, I get the pleasure and the joy to like mentor and inspire future generations of professionals on their unique journeys to making a positive impact on this world. So I feel like I got the best of both worlds in what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like you do, for sure. So why is Juneteenth important to you and the work that you do?
So yeah, Juneteenth is important to me for a lot of reasons. I think personally, for being a Black American, I have celebrated Juneteenth pretty much my whole life with my family. And so I recognize its importance to my family history. And it's really a celebratory and joyous holiday for me, as I can just reflect on like the strength and resilience of my ancestors. But also now being a mother of Black children, I feel like I'm like squarely in the role of teaching them about the history of our people and fostering their own sense of self-love and self-worth. And so it's become even more of a momentous holiday for me. And then professionally, I just think it's my responsibility to advocate for a world where we can just do a better job of honoring the history of Juneteenth, while also actively contributing to further change and growth.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's nice to know that some schools actually like recognize it. I know some workplaces also recognize the day as a holiday. I don't think a lot of employment places are there yet, but it sounds like we're on our way there. Thank you so much, Dr. Holcomb. Last but not least, Dr. Sandra Wilkerson. How are you?
I am good. My name is Dr. Sandra Wilkerson. I have been licensed as a marriage and family therapist in the state of Florida for over 20 years. I'm also a master certified addictions professional. Currently, I am working on a virtual platform full time, primarily with individuals who are in the workplace. I like to think of myself as trying to bring more mental health into the workspace. I also do some adjuncting on the side. So pretty passionate, been around the block a few times as a marriage and family therapist.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. We have some very powerful ladies on our panel tonight. So I'm going to move into topic 1, which is the importance of Juneteenth for marriage and family therapists. I want to hear from all of you guys. Why do you think marriage and family therapists should really be aware of today? And why do you think we should celebrate Juneteenth?
I can go first, like in order. So this goes back to really the emphasis that I see with clients on that intergenerational trauma. And part of that means that we have to know our history. And so it's kind of like if we don't know our history of Juneteenth along with the Emancipation Proclamation, then we also like don't know our history in general. And so we have to start from there. We want to think about when we first have clients, we are doing an intake, we are history taking. And I find that sometimes our therapists miss that just point even with our clients. So there's a question like I have on my intake about like, what does your culture or what does race mean to you? And sometimes people don't even have that question on their intake. And I mean, we're missing a big piece about knowing what that means for that client. And particularly when I work with a lot of, majority of my clients are African-American moms or African-American women wanting to be a mom and wanting to learn how they can like really work through their intergenerational trauma. So it's kind of like if we ignore Juneteenth, it's like we're just ignoring history, and we all know about history. You have to know it so that you can learn from it so then we don't repeat it. And so when our moms are trying to really work through, how do I teach my child something? How do I learn how to like maybe not like to discipline them a certain way? We have to ask the question, well, what did you learn from your mom, your mom's mom, your grandparents? And so that's the same thing that we're talking about with Juneteenth, is like knowing your history. And that is for all clinicians. So we're not just talking about clinicians that are African-American, we're talking about all clinicians that really need to know history, which is America's history. And I think that somehow that's like being, like it's missed in that is like, this is really a history lesson. And we also want to think about our history lesson in terms of our legal system. So Emancipation Proclamation, Juneteenth, it belongs with our legal system. And we kept going with like civil rights movement. We kept going with, I think recently we did the anniversary for the equal rights of like credit our credit act. So we're just now like realizing that, yeah, 60 years ago, like women cannot get a credit card, like Black people cannot get access to credit. And so if we don't know that history, then we're missing out on a huge piece when it comes to a family system. And we have to include our history with that. And that really affects our intergenerational trauma that each of our client is going through. So it's just having that knowledge of that just from the beginning is most important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you work with Black moms, like you said. Do you normally come across the majority of your clients who are just not aware of Juneteenth and what it is?
Yeah, I don't. And it's we're interesting. Like my clients are, I would probably say we've got like 85% mostly either Black or brown. That's what they're identifying with. And I have a large amount of clients who are identified as white, and they actually would identify themselves as allies. And so they actually do know. So I don't know. Someone asked me a question about that, like what would happen if I had a client who did not know? And I think they would have to ask that question to me. I would not just like start talking about Juneteenth. That's just not, I think therapeutically, that's not something that I would do or I would say to do. It would be more about like they usually would ask a question that would open up the discussion. And I would love to have that discussion with them. I just haven't had that experience yet.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Holcomb, so you train and supervise a lot of newer therapists. What would you tell marriage and family therapists new to this field about the importance of Juneteenth?
Yeah, so I train, I guess, doctoral level MFTs. So they're not brand new to therapy per se, since they have their master's degree. But a lot of them have told me throughout the years that they have felt like they've had very little experience or training or just comfort with talking to clients about race or just any social justice issues, like let alone what Mrs. Kai said about like history. Like when one of our training, do we talk with marriage and family therapists about how to have these conversations with clients? And so I teach a class at FSU called MFT Social Justice and Diversity. And one of the things that I talk to my students about is like the importance of developing critical consciousness, which I think is exactly what Mrs. Kais was saying, right? Is like we have to like know our history, right? We have to be comfortable knowing what we don't know, right? And being open to learning a little bit more so that we can recognize systems of inequality, so that we can feel more empowered to create socio-political change, right? So specifically as it relates to Juneteenth, I would tell MFTs that it's really important for us to learn the history of Juneteenth, right? I would say that it's important for us as MFTs even to be critical of why so many of us don't know about Juneteenth in 2024, right? Like how is that possible? So really honing in on the erasure of history. And even to be even more critical on the why as it relates to our field as MFTs, why we aren't trained in having these conversations with our Black clients. Why are we not trained in honoring the history and the culture and the heritage of our clients of color? What is missing within our MFT training that we are not doing a better job at that? And so I think that's really important. And that's something that I really stress is like, okay, we have to raise our own critical consciousness. Do you know the history? You know, do you know your own history? And then do you feel comfortable talking to clients, other people about it? And I think Juneteenth specifically as a holiday is a really great opportunity to highlight things like the complexity of emotions. Like it can work with any of our clients' lived experiences, right? Because this day represents, I don't know, things like grief and happiness, right? Like sadness and joy, right? There's a whole bunch of mixture of things, right? Like the grief reflected in how the history of this country is like founded in legacy of enslavement, right? And how anti-Black racism and racial trauma are still relevant and being inflicted today, right? So there's a lot of grief and hurt and anger around that and sadness. Grief, if you are not a person of color, if you're not Black, if you identify as white, you may feel sadness on this day due to the actions of your ancestors, right? And so you're going through a grieving process as well, or we may feel anger and shame that this is just the history of our country. But there's also a lot of joy, like I talked about before. Like, I feel a lot of joy in reflecting on the strength and resilience of Black Americans who, despite being enslaved, carried with them the spirit of liberation, and then pass that on to me, right? Pass that on to future generations. As Mrs. Kais was talking about, intergenerational trauma, yes, but also intergenerational strength and resilience, right? And so, yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for MFTs to also utilize this as a conversation about emotions and being able to hold multiple things at one time.
Awesome, thank you. I think my biggest takeaway from that is just also MFTs, just being comfortable with what we don't know, right? A lot of growth just starts from that process. So thank you for that. Dr. Wilkerson, so you work with employees in the business sector. Can you share why it is important for employees to recognize Juneteenth, and maybe some things an employer can do to respectfully celebrate this day, Juneteenth?
It's really important in the workspace because people want to be seen. You know, a lot of times as when you're in the workspace, we're all trying to get our jobs done, and not being able to acknowledge, someone as an individual along with their history. It's kind of hard to be able to really appreciate their point of view. We want these diverse workspaces, but oftentimes we kind of minimize the true contributions that people of color bring to the workspace. I've been kind of like being really cognizant of how people are celebrating it, recognize it, watching commercials. And we did some fun things because I'm like Dr. Holcomb, I've been celebrating Juneteenth for a while. And it's always saddened when I'm making plans to go to the beach with my friends and they don't get time off. And I think that's just that to me, it's very disrespectful when it's recognized as a federal holiday, and an employee is told, well, you can use your PTO if you want to use it. We recognize it, but you can't take time off. So I think it just really, in so many ways, when employers don't recognize it, for me, and I see those things, it is as if you're minimizing our contributions. You're minimizing history. We live in Florida, and we're already trying to kind of minimize the interactions that occurred during slavery. So I think it's just the way in the workplace, I think when people acknowledge it, we're allowed to kind of write our own history. We're able to just have a space to talk about it with our friends in the workspace if they are comfortable with that. So I think that's why it's really, really important. Have that space to talk about it. Gives that space to be able to not only just talk about Juneteenth and Black history, but other races, other people's experiences in our country.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to move us through topic number 2, which is the benefits of Juneteenth for clients and how MFTs can essentially talk comfortably about this topic with clients. So Mrs. Kais, what would you say has been the most effective for you in talking about Juneteenth with your clients?
Yeah, so I want to kind of preface this by saying I currently am in private practice, which means that, and I say this for most private practice clinicians, I run a business, and so I essentially have a specific clientele that comes into my office. So I have worked in spaces where I have worked in inpatient with children and families, and I haven't really had that. I would say it's a luxury, I'll be very honest, because now I have a situation where I mostly have Black and Brown clients who understand, we understand each other's language. And so when you ask me the question is what if you have a client who doesn't know? It's because I'm in private practice. And so that's such a different space where we can have that conversation. And so this is all about knowing your client. We have to be take a lot of our biases, like Dr. Holcomb was saying, like you have to understand as a therapist, what are your biases? What are the things that are going to come and up that are going to confront, you? And I've had situations in the past where that has happened, but it's really checking in with yourself and your emotional experiences. So the benefits of talking about Juneteenth is that you can have that open discussion where for my clients, they're like, wow, I can share something that maybe I can't share in another space. So it's really about freedom and being able to share that and ask those questions and have a space to do that. And I just think, I hope that like therapists understand that that's our primary role, is to create open, free space for our clients to be able to talk about Juneteenth. For my clients, usually it is how to do like some sort of psychoeducation with their children. So how to talk about Juneteenth, talk about race relations, I have clientele of a lot of educators, like teachers, who I can't tell you how many times last year I've had people crying because they were afraid that they are going to go to jail for giving a book out. And so that's the climate that we have had. And so to have a safe space to be able to share that and how they will navigate that is important. So I encourage therapists too to have some things on hand to be able to have that discussion. Maybe it's books that you read, maybe it's YouTube or podcasts that you educate yourself in. I'm a really big proponent of you should be, as a therapist, you should be reading something, or you should be like listening to something. I know it's hard, but turn it on in your car, because I think that will be helpful also for our clients, so we can provide some psychoeducation, especially for our parents, because they're lost. They don't know what to do when they know that their child can't be taught something, particularly about Juneteenth or slavery in their school. So they're like, okay, so what do I do? How do I have this conversation with my child? And so that's why Juneteenth is important, because it opens up that safe space to have that conversation for our clients.
Mhm. Thank you so much. If there's anything that you can think of in terms of materials, please, shoot it in the chat. We'd love to hear.
Sure.
So I'm sure many of us are probably thinking, are we only supposed to talk about Juneteenth with Black clients? How do we navigate that? So Dr. Holcomb, is it important for therapists to discuss Juneteenth with clients of all races, and ethnic identities?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important. I mentioned before that developing critical consciousness is really important to creating change, right? And so talking about the history of Juneteenth shouldn't be reserved just for Black Americans, right? We should be open and willing to discuss it with all of our clients if we want to create widespread awareness of the holiday, and more importantly, like raising everybody's critical consciousness to our collective history, like we talked about, that's trying to be erased, and the ways in which Black Americans are still being marginalized today. So I take a little different approach. Like, I think it's important for therapists to bring up these topics first. And the reason why is because our clients don't feel comfortable addressing these topics, especially if they don't know Juneteenth, right? Like, how would they know that they could bring up Juneteenth in therapy if they don't even know Juneteenth exists? Or maybe they know Juneteenth exists, but they don't think that therapy is the place for them to acknowledge it, right? And so it's really important to me when I teach clinicians that are wanting to do this work, right? Is that we have to be open to, in the same way that Mrs. Kais talked about, like in the intake paperwork, like identifying like what are your cultural passions, right? Like what's your history? What's your heritage? Talk to me about that. We also should be open in our intake process to letting clients know that we are going to be talking about socio-political issues, right? Because therapy is political in and of itself. Anything that's going on with me, anything that's going on with my clients has an impact politically, right? Or is being impacted by our political system. So I really think it's important for us to be comfortable bringing it up with our clients. So if you have a Black client who's like celebrating Juneteenth and they are already talking to you about it, great. Like that's kind of easy work, right? Like in the sense of you don't have to pull out your toolkit of like, oh, how do I do this? But when I talk to therapists, their discomfort is like, how do I bring it up first, right? Especially with clients who identify as white. And so one of the things, I mean, we could just say like, hey, today is Juneteenth. Is that a holiday that you know about? Or Juneteenth is coming up. Is that something that you are aware of? Have you celebrated Juneteenth before? And taking a psychoeducation approach, right? The students that I teach, when I talk to them about these things, their fear is not of having that conversation per se. They're very competent. Everyone's very competent in bringing that up. The fear is like, what if the conversation doesn't go well, right? Like, what if the client feels negatively towards Juneteenth? If the client is like, oh, yeah, I've heard of Juneteenth, or oh, I haven't heard of that, I'm curious, tell me more, then that's kind of great. Like, but the struggle is like, what if they respond negatively? What if they are an individual who perpetrates anti-Black racism? What if they are an individual who benefits from anti-Black racism? And so how do we navigate that? And I still say that it's important to bring it up, right? It's important to say, acknowledge that today's Juneteenth is coming up. What are your thoughts on that? And if clients have something negative, here's something that maybe we could say. So if a client is like, I don't want to talk about that, is the only holiday that I celebrate, I'm not acknowledging Juneteenth, whatever kind of maybe negative rhetoric that they might come back to you with, you could say something like, it's important to me and to my practice that I acknowledge and stand up for any group who has been systemically harmed in any way. And I respect your decision if you choose not to celebrate Juneteenth or discuss the history of the holiday in this space. However, I will not tolerate anti-Black racism or contribute to any misinformation that might further harm or marginalize communities, right? And so I respect your decision if you don't want to talk about Juneteenth, but what I won't do in this space is further perpetuate the harm that we're talking about today, of therapists. Like our role is trying to prevent, right? And so if we think about the impacts of ignoring Juneteenth, MFTs cannot continue to be complicit in the silence, right? If we're going to have panels like this, like we have to be brave and courageous and be willing to take a stand and let our clients know that this is a space where I honor and I recognize the history of Black Americans. And I can respect if you don't think this is a space for us to talk about that. But what I won't do is contribute to the systemic racism that is harming communities that I serve. So that's always options that I give therapists that I train, because again, I think it's really important that we have these conversations with people who are not Black, in order to create collective healing, collective liberation, collective awareness of ways that we can make some change.
Well said. Dr. Wilkerson, how would you advise therapists to discuss Juneteenth with their clients? Would something like Happy Juneteenth be appropriate to say?
I've thought about that since we can, as we prepared for this workshop. And my thoughts have changed since we kind of talked about it. And it's evolved to the place where, and I think it's kind of it's based on kind of what we're talking about with this range of emotions we have. I think however you respond or choose to maybe express it, it has to be relational. Hanging out with friends today, you can come up to me and say Happy Juneteenth, my Facebook post, and say, hey, anytime we can celebrate freedom, it's time to celebrate. But I talked to my 17-year-old daughter, and she's like, why are we celebrating the fact that this country did us this way, and it took so long for people in Galveston to get free? So I think I would really just advise someone based on your relationship with someone. If I'm talking to training MFTs, I am the type, I'm really good at establishing rapport. I look forward to seeing my clients tomorrow and asking them, and I have a very diverse diverse client caseload, asking them, hey, did you do anything for Juneteenth? My other social work friend said she would never do that. And I think just because the relationship that I've developed with them, we talk about tough things in therapy spaces. We can't be afraid. And I think, being a primarily kind of like a narrative therapist who focus on emotions, I never know what I'm going to get from that to help someone, because we are Americans and we are still impacted by racism. We are still, we're talking about intergenerational trauma. We are still impacted by these things. Or I have a Black son, a 16-year-old Black son, and I still fear for his life. So, and that is a result of Jim Crow laws. That's a result of, us being marginalized as the people. So in my efforts to help people develop a collective consciousness, and their own identity, I think it's just really important that we relationally, based on rapport, have those conversations. But I do believe that, somehow we can work it in the conversation, because, working with clients on Father's Day, it was like, okay, how was Father's Day when all we've been talking about is your mom? So it gives us an opportunity to kind of go places that people may not have had an avenue to be able to talk about other issues. So I don't know if I answered the question. I became a little passionate.
You
I
did.
see the passion and I love the passion.
Can I chime in on something? I think we're touching on the uncomfortability of like our clients who either are not allies, don't know, or don't agree with Juneteenth. And I think like that is the biggest, I think, fear. And I think Dr. Holcomb said, like, with what do you do when you have someone who goes against and says, like, I don't know why we're celebrating Juneteenth? And to stand up as a therapist and say, well, this is what I believe for Juneteenth, and this is what, I'm advocating for. I think for most therapists, particularly very new therapists, I think that would be hard for them to do, but it also needs to happen. And so I guess that goes into how we navigate, how we like build our MFT programs and have those conversations. Because yes, I did not have those type of role plays or conversations in my graduate studies program. Like we didn't have that. So you have to be kind of like, goes back to knowing yourself. Like you have to really know yourself as a therapist, and be sure about what you're advocating for, to be able to say those things like Dr. Wilkerson said about relationships and have that relation factor. But I think you're going to have some clients, particularly in the beginning of your training, where they may not be your ideal client, or they may not be that client that agrees with you. And so it's like, that's really what the issue is how do you still talk and share about what you believe in, despite what that client's going through? Because they could be going through addiction, they could be going through mental health issues. And so like respect that. For me, it would be in my private practice, it would probably end up being a referral to refer out. The relationship just would not, I wouldn't want to hinder that relationship for their clinical treatment. I would, of course, advocate, but I think in the end, that relationship factor is really important for therapists. Unless they wanted to continue that, but I don't know how anyone else feels about that, like having a client in front of you consistently who would disagree with you on Juneteenth. How would you navigate that?
Yeah, like it's tough, right? Because disagreement is welcomed, right? Like we can disagree. However, if the client isn't the way that I see critical consciousness developing is similar to like other identities, right? Like we're at the very beginning, like you're going to have some resistance, you're going to have some pushback, because this is new. This is not what I know. This is, going against my homeostasis. So there is going to be a like, no, I don't agree with that. That's not something I celebrate. And so I'm willing to sit with that if clients are open to explore further. right? Sure, you can disagree, and it may not be something that you want to talk about today. But if my role as a therapist, and if I see how our sociopolitical systems impact our mental health, you best believe that me as a therapist is going to continue to bring up how race issues and whatever is impacting people's mental health, is impacting my clients' particular presenting problems. And that's part of raising the critical consciousness, is like, you might not see it today. And the thing is that was planned, right? If we go back to the erasure of history, that is the intention, is that we don't make these connections. We don't see the way that Juneteenth, or we don't see the way that anti-Black racism affects everybody, right? And so part of the therapeutic work is to help our clients see that, like, this does impact you, even if you're really resistant to it. And so I'd sit in that discomfort for as long as the client was willing to be open to the conversation. But certainly, you know, if they are not interested in that and maybe become disrespectful or racist or whatever the case may be, then that's definitely something that we wouldn't tolerate. And so that's why it's important for therapists to know their stance, right? I'm willing to walk with you and help develop your critical consciousness, but you have to be open to some of the things that, you know, open to history, right? Open to, yeah, to the reality of what we are experiencing.
Yeah. And the uncomfortable conversation, because that's uncomfortable.
And that it's going to be tough. Absolutely.
So this is a great segment into our last topic, which is navigating the political climate. We were just talking about resistance when it comes to maybe clients who are not as accepting of Juneteenth, but what about MFTs navigating Florida's dismissive and oppressive legislative policies? So Mrs. Kais, in your work with parents and their children, what are the most common concerns expressed about the celebration of Juneteenth, or simply the ability to educate children about this holiday?
The biggest concern, and this is on a professional level, so seeing it with clients, but also seeing it personally, is that, and I think when Dr. Wilkerson was talking about the workplace, people are feeling in the education system that we're not being seen. So that means that when we're eliminating books, when we're eliminating talk about not only Juneteenth, about slavery, about civil rights, and this is not only, remember, the books that are banned are not only about African American communities, there's also about Latina communities and so forth. And so we have to think about, it's like our children are not being seen. And so that's the biggest concern for our parents. As I said, I work with a lot of teachers, is that they want to build that resilience within our kids. They want to have them have education, a well-rounded education. And a lot of our parents feel like they're not able to do that. And so it's like, so, and that goes back to the emotions that start to come in, the grief, the trauma is like, I'm not seen, I'm not important, I'm not enough. It like actually just keeps that going, that whole core belief of that I'm not good enough, I'm not capable, I'm not worth anything. And so that cycle keeps happening for our parents, and then now it's happening for our children too as well. What I tend to do is we process that. Using EMDR is really helpful, though it's hard when they're still seeing it every day in a systemic way in their education system. I do encourage parents to have the conversation in the home. That is the number one place that we are having those conversations. We're not only reading books, but an example today, I was taking my daughter to camp, and we're writing, and we're like talking about Juneteenth, and she's talking about things that she learned in first grade with her teacher. Love her teacher. She just bypassed whatever she needed to do to teach the children what civil rights. My daughter knows several, not only from our discussions at home, but also through her teacher, and her school actually fosters a lot. There's pictures, there's murals of African American civil rights leaders. They found a way. They said, well, you're not going to ban books, but we're actually going to make sure that we create an environment of inclusion. And so, but there are a lot of schools who don't do that. And so we're doing a disservice to our children, to our families, to basically tell them that, you're not enough. We're just going to erase this and kind of not talk about it. And so that brings up a lot of emotions and continues the trauma. And so just, having a discussion, recognizing that as therapists, and the emotional impact and trauma that it's going to have for us generationally, and taking control of that in your household, since our systems are not able to do that right now in terms of our education system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing that your daughter's teacher can do that, right? Find ways to kind of sprinkle that information and knowledge in the ways that, she's able to.
Though she has administration and probably school board to back her up on that too. And that also plays in the local systems. So we also want to think of Florida as a whole, but we also want to think of our local school districts and our systems that happen within that too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Holcomb, what can MFTs do to advocate for their Black clients? I'm sure many feel helpless in navigating the political climate here in Florida.
Yeah, it's tough, right? It's a challenge. I think first, like I said earlier, is MFTs truly embracing this idea that like therapy is a political space, right? And so that we have to be aware and engage with the political climate because it directly impacts what our clients are going through, right? And so that's like the first step, because I get a lot of pushback when I do trainings or when I talk to educators or practitioners about like, well, does this even belong in the therapy space, right? Do these political conversations even belong here? And I'm like, absolutely. So I think that's the first step, is for MFTs to believe that this is the place for political conversations, and then to align ourselves with groups who are advocating for policies that would better support Black Americans, who uplift Black communities, right? Or to be aware of the policies that are harmful to your Black clients, right? And so the Florida Family Team has a lot of advocacy around the MFT profession, right? Or following some advocacy groups on social media, to see different ways that you can get involved and stay connected. I think that that's really important for MFTs to feel empowered, to know that like our voice is important in this political arena too. But also like even in smaller ways, because I know that can feel overwhelming. A lot of people are like, I don't know, I didn't get a political science degree. Like I don't know how to talk to politicians or how to, advocate in that space. And I completely get it. It's not my area either. It's one area that I'm working on. But I think something that we can do now is to really feel strongly in our beliefs and feel brave and open about our values and communicating that within our practices. Right. So that can look like making sure that your website or your social media presence or your office materials or the ways in which you introduce yourself reflect your values, in regards to, you acknowledge history, you are an ally in eradicating anti-Black racism, right? So really just being intentional about positioning yourself and your practice as one that is social justice focused, right? Everything that you do as an MFT will reflect that. So what businesses do you support within your practice? What collaborations do you have within the communities, or what collaborations don't you have within the communities? What ways in which do you support other Black MFTs or other Black businesses within your community? What therapy methods and practices do you use? And do they align with the liberation of all people, not just Black people, right? But all of that is really important for us to do personally, right? So I don't know, just being vocal, not doing this work in the shadows, right? Like just being really open about the ways in which we are trying to contribute to some change. So I feel like that's more doable if we don't feel like, you know, we can navigate the political space. But I did want to just say one thing about like connecting political policies or, you know, structures that are in place with our clients, like presenting problems. So for instance, like our clients can come in and be talking about, I don't know, their struggles financially. Maybe they want to buy a home, or maybe they, you know, want to get a loan for something, or whatnot, right? And you can use, while you're listening and validating to their experience, you can use this as an opportunity to talk about the history of housing discrimination in this country, right? So it doesn't have to be like, oh, I hear you about that. Let me talk about this over here. Like we can directly connect our clients' experiences with the ways that policies are either supporting them or making it worse, right? And so it's like, oh, I hear you. You're feeling very depressed. Like you're really struggling with this. In what ways are the systems that are you are interacting with contributing to your depression, right? Or in what ways are they helping you, right? We can inquire about that. You're feeling isolated at school because nobody recognized Juneteenth. Can we talk about the policies that are in place that make it really challenging for schools right now to be able to acknowledge Juneteenth, right? Like, so we can make a direct connection. It doesn't have to be out of left field or take us away from what the clients are experiencing. And I think as therapists, if we can start getting skilled in that, and that everything that our clients are experiencing, if we can connect it to the larger systems, as MFTs, we're actually extra skilled in this, then that is doing this work, right? Like that is truly raising critical consciousness, and that's connecting our clients' personal experiences to the ways in which the larger system may be adding to their distress. It also like relieves them of like something is wrong with me, right? Like Mrs. Kais was talking about that, like that core belief of like, I am not good enough. Something is wrong with me. No, like something is wrong with these systems, right? These systems are making you feel this way, right? And that can be really liberating and empowering for our clients, for us to name, right? It's not, let me sit in this depression with you. Let me sit in this place of shame with you. It is, let me relieve you of some of that because that is not yours, right? That should belong, the responsibility of that should belong on some of these larger systems. And I think that that is really, really important when we're talking about how do MFTs engage with the political structure. I saw a quote recently, and I'll end with this, that said, let's be softer on one another and harder on the systems that are impacting us. And that really resonated with me, right? Like, let's give each other the benefit of the doubt. We may be struggling with addiction. We may be struggling in our romantic relationships. We may be struggling with our sense of self-worth. Like, let's be softer on one another and harder on the systems that are impacting our ability to heal and liberate ourselves.
Thank you. That's great examples of ways we can validate and continue to validate clients in this space. All right, our last question for the night. Dr. Wilkerson, even though Juneteenth is a federal holiday, Florida is one of 22 states where it is recognized, but not as an official state holiday. So as you work with employees and in the business sector, how do you help your Black clients navigate their work environment, especially if there is no widespread acknowledgement of Juneteenth being a holiday?
I think one of the most critical things I can do and other MFTs do is provide a safe space for them to talk about how that impacts them as an employee, because we know a lot of our identity is wrapped up in where we work, who we work with. It's I think having conversations about person organization fit. It's like, you know, aligning my values with my company values. And those are the conversations I've been having with my friends who have jobs. It's like, okay, it doesn't sound like they acknowledge you when no one is, you know, seeing how important Juneteenth is. But people got to keep their jobs, you know, and not everyone has that have the skill set, or it's hard getting a job in today's society. So I think it's just being able to figure out if they can advocate, who can you talk with about maybe what the issue is. But like we're talking about the larger systems, it depends on how empowered you feel about who you can talk to. But in the grand scheme of things, Juneteenth is really, really important. It's a day, and I wouldn't want a client to consume too much of it. Let's look at other, how else are your values aligned with the company. But just giving them the space to be able to say, it really sucks that my company doesn't acknowledge it, or just asking them what it's like being in a system where you don't feel seen or heard. And I think, as we've been talking, everyone has a different experience with Juneteenth. So I think it's just really important, one, being comfortable with asking, and two, helping them with their thoughts, and then seeing if there's other layers to the issue. Because some of my friends treat it so nonchalantly, and then other ones are kind of like upset that their company is not recognizing Juneteenth. So I just think sometimes all we need to do is just hold space with people, and this too will kind of pass, and maybe next year it'll look differently. So I think that's what we can do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Wilkerson. So I do want to take this time to welcome any questions from the audience. Go for it, Linda.
Yeah, I just had a comment more than a question. I had to make a call today to one of our federal offices. And when I made the call, I was absolutely surprised to hear that the office that I called, the Office of Medicare, as I'm now working with some Medicare clients now, that it was closed for Juneteenth. And I was like, wow, I was actually delighted, even though I wasn't able to talk with someone about the questions that I had. And then I started to think, I wonder if our banks are open today. Are our banks open? Is this open? Is this because it is supposed to be a government holiday. Here it is in the middle of the week. But I was surprised, but delightfully surprised, that our Social Security Administration was closed today in honor of Juneteenth. So I just wanted to share that. It's been a wonderful panel discussion. Thank you to all of the panelists.
Thank you, Linda.
I just wanted to comment that that I was patting myself on the back, that I invited, put out the call in Facebook to have you all come, and aren't we good that we're doing a Juneteenth event? And I did not talk about it with any of my students, not one. Talk about a V8 moment, right? I didn't talk about it with my students. I didn't talk about it with my registered interns that I supervise. I didn't talk about it today with the people that I mentor. So good for me, and FFTA, we had the panel, but dang, there's so much more I could have been doing for the last week, the last month. I could have changed this background to have been a Juneteenth background. I mean, none of this is hard, but I just didn't think to do it. And so, our slow consciousness has to keep growing. My slow consciousness has to keep growing. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one.
No, you're
So
not.
thank you.
We'll be celebrating again next year. So
Yeah.
Well, we don't
next
even, the beauty of it is you don't have to wait until next year, right? This is something that I tell my students all the time, like missed opportunities are just that, right? And I really applaud you, Annalyn, for being vulnerable and saying like, man, these are the ways in which I missed, because that's part of the work. But the next time you see your students, whether it be tomorrow or next week, be like, you know what? I missed honoring and acknowledging that Juneteenth was last Wednesday. Let's have a conversation about that. Did any of you celebrate in what ways did that impact you, right? We can always come back to it, and that's the beauty of this work.
Yeah.
And this is not just, I mean, I know it's Juneteenth today, but this should also be a year-round discussion. So you can see how easily we can just forget about things, particularly in our counselor education departments. We can forget about these kind of difficult conversations. So now I love that you're saying that it also kind of makes us understand that like we're human and things happen, but we can still talk about it, throughout.
Beautiful
Right.
thing is, Dr. Schooley, you'll have the recording, so you can always play it back.
Oh, well, and of course, that's the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disseminate this recording to all the folks. I'm gonna put it up on our Facebook page. I'm gonna put it out there. But to still, recognizing those missed opportunities that I hopefully will not miss again. So thank you for reminding of this. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you everyone for coming. If you have more questions, I'm sure these doctors and ladies would be more than happy to answer them. If you want to shoot an email to us at FFTA, if you will please go look in the chat. Mrs. Kai's put a whole bunch of resources in there, so harvest those out of there. And then just above that, I have two links there. One is how you can join the Florida Family Team. You do not have to be an AAMFT member to join the family team, though AMFT does not want me to say that, but I done did it anyway. And then above that is the link to the Florida Family Therapy Alliance website. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a form for you to fill out to post the evaluation of this event. And we'll be working on getting your CEUs loaded into CE Broker, and Malini will be getting your certificates out to you. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening of Juneteenth, and I hope you get to do something that celebrates the day.